The first gunshot rang out just as Genevieve Forrester placed her trembling hand on Gregory Amberson's arm, a mockery of the marriage vows she never wanted to make. The small church in Santa Fe, New Mexico, erupted in chaos, ladies in their Sunday finest screaming, gentlemen diving for cover, and her unwanted groom cowering behind the preacher. Only Genevieve remained still, her white dress billowing around her like a ghost in the dusty sunlight that streamed through the stained glass. It was 1878, and in that moment, as the church doors crashed open, Genevieve knew her life would never be the same. "I believe this wedding is over," called a deep voice that sent shivers down her spine. Standing in the doorway, backlit by the harsh New Mexico sun, was Samuel Nolan, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the church floor. His Stetson was pulled low over his eyes, but Genevieve would know him anywhere. The man she truly loved had returned, just as he promised, though a year later than expected. "Samuel," she whispered, the name a prayer on her lips. The gathered guests, Santa Fe's finest citizens, business associates of her father's, and members of the Amberson family, burst into scandalized whispers that quickly grew to outright laughter. Her humiliation was complete. They laughed as she stood at the altar, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before their eyes. Samuel didn't seem to hear them. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he strode purposefully down the aisle, his eyes never leaving hers. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "Come with me, Jenny," he said softly for her ears alone. "I've come to take you home." Behind her, Gregory sputtered indignantly. This is outrageous. Marshal, arrest this man." The town marshal, who had been enjoying the free champagne promised at the reception, reluctantly stood. "Now, Samuel, you know I can't let you this woman doesn't belong with him," Samuel said firmly. "Ask her yourself." All eyes turned to Genevieve, who still hadn't moved. The weight of her father's expectations, the Amberson family's influence, and her own shattered hopes pressed down on her shoulders, but Samuel's hand remained outstretched, steady and sure. "Genevieve," her father's voice boomed from the front pew, "stop this nonsense immediately. Think of our arrangement with the Ambersons, the business arrangement that had forced her into this marriage in the first place. Her father's struggling cattle ranch saved by the wealthy Amberson family in exchange for his only daughter's hand." "I'm sorry, Father," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But I cannot marry a man I do not love." And with that, she placed her hand in Samuel's. The crowd gasped collectively as he pulled her close, protecting her from the angry shouts that erupted around them. Gregory lunged forward, his face contorted with rage, but Samuel simply stepped backward, drawing Genevieve with him. "There's a horse waiting outside," he murmured against her ear. "Can you ride in that dress?" She nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'll manage." They backed toward the door, Samuel shielding her with his body. When they reached the entrance, he whistled sharply, and two horses appeared, his sturdy palomino and a dappled gray mare. "That's my horse," Gregory shouted, pointing at the gray. "I'll return her," Samuel called back with a grin that suggested otherwise. "Eventually." He helped Genevieve gather her voluminous skirts and mount the horse, then swung onto his own. Behind them, the wedding guests poured out of the church, the marshal among them, reaching for his gun. "Hold it right there, Nolan." But Samuel had already spurred his horse forward, and Genevieve followed suit. They thundered down the main street of Santa Fe, past shocked onlookers and curious children, dust billowing behind them like wedding rice. "Where are we going?" Genevieve shouted over the pounding hooves. Samuel glanced back, his smile as wild and free as the New Mexico territory itself. "Wherever you want, Jenny. We've got the whole world ahead of us." As they reached the edge of town, Genevieve took one last look at the life she was leaving behind: the respectable merchant's daughter, the dutiful fiancée, the perfect society lady. Then she faced forward, toward the endless horizon and the man who had risked everything to save her. The first night, they made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods near the Rio Grande. Samuel had packed supplies on his horse, anticipating their flight: blankets, food, coffee, and even a small tent for Genevieve's privacy. As she sat by the fire in her torn and dirty wedding dress, she felt more alive than she had in the entire year Samuel had been gone. "You're staring," she said softly, catching his eyes on her across the flames. "Can't help it," he replied, stirring the pot of beans he'd set to cook. "Still can't believe I found you in time." "How did you know about the wedding?" Samuel's face darkened. "Got a letter from Martha Jenkins. She said your father had arranged a marriage for you, that you were unhappy but felt trapped." Martha, the seamstress who had made Genevieve's wedding dress, had been like a second mother to her since her own mother's death years ago. She had known about Samuel and Genevieve's secret courtship before he'd left for Colorado. "I rode for 3 days straight to get to you," he continued. "Almost killed my horse doing it." Genevieve looked down at her hands, the gold engagement ring Gregory had given her still glinting mockingly on her finger. She twisted it off and held it over the fire. "Don't," Samuel said quickly. "That might come in handy if we need money." She hesitated, then tucked it into the bodice of her dress. "I suppose you're right, though it feels wrong to keep it. We'll send it back when we're settled somewhere safe." He passed her a tin plate of beans and salt pork. "Eat, you'll need your strength." As they ate in companionable silence, the gravity of what she'd done began to sink in. She had abandoned her wedding, humiliated her father, and run off with a man who, despite their love, had no legal claim to her. In the eyes of society and the law, she was as good as ruined. "They'll come after us, won't they?" she asked quietly. Samuel nodded, his expression grim. "Gregory's pride is wounded and your father's business deal is in jeopardy. Plus, I did steal one of the Ambersons' prize horses. What will we do?" "We'll head north toward Colorado. I've got a small claim there, a cabin. It's isolated, but it's a good place to lay low until things settle." Genevieve shivered, though not from cold. The June evening was warm, but the uncertainty of their future chilled her. "And then what?" Samuel reached across the fire and took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, solid and reassuring. "And then we build a life, Jenny, the one we always talked about." She remembered those whispered conversations on her father's porch under the watchful stars of the New Mexico sky. Dreams of a small ranch, a few good horses, children running free in the open spaces. A simple life, but one filled with love and purpose. "I missed you," she confessed, gripping his hand tighter. "Every day you were gone, I missed you. I'm sorry it took so long. The claim wasn't producing like I'd hoped. I wanted to come back with enough to offer you a proper life, to ask your father for your hand properly. And now we're fugitives," she said with a small laugh that held no humor. Samuel's expression grew serious. "Do you regret coming with me?" "It's not too late, Jenny. I could take you back tomorrow, explain that I forced you." "No," she interrupted fiercely. "I won't go back. I couldn't bear to be Gregory's wife, not when—" She paused, gathering her courage. "Not when I've loved you since we were children." The firelight caught the moisture in Samuel's eyes before he blinked it away. "I've loved you just as long, Genevieve Forrester. And I swear, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." That night, Genevieve slept in the small tent alone, her wedding dress replaced by one of Samuel's spare shirts. It hung to her knees, smelling of him leather, pine, and the faint trace of tobacco. Outside, she could hear him moving around the camp, checking on the horses, adding wood to the fire. keeping watch. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, Genevieve fell asleep with a smile on her face. Free for the first time in her 20 years of life, morning came with the sound of hoofbeats. Samuel's urgent whisper woke her. "Jenny, get up. Riders coming." She scrambled from the tent, her heart in her throat. Samuel was already dousing the fire, his movements quick but controlled. He handed her a bundle of clothes. "Put these on. They'll be big, but they'll help you ride better than that shirt." They were men's clothes, canvas trousers, a worn cotton shirt, and a leather vest. She ducked back into the tent and changed quickly, rolling the cuffs of the trousers and securing them with a belt cinched tight around her waist. By the time she emerged, Samuel had broken down the camp, leaving almost no trace of their presence. "How many?" she asked, stuffing her long auburn hair under a hat he handed her. "4, maybe 5. Still a ways off, but moving fast." He helped her onto the gray mare, then mounted his own horse. "If they catch up, you keep riding north. Follow the river until you reach the settlement at San Marcos. Ask for Elijah Cooper, he's an old friend, he'll help you." Fear gripped her. "What about you?" Samuel checked his revolver, then tucked it back into his holster. "I'll lead them away, then circle back to find you." "No, I won't leave you, Jenny." His voice was firm. "Promise me. Your safety is all that matters." Before she could argue further, the riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the rising sun. Genevieve recognized her father's tall form immediately, and beside him, Gregory's distinctive bowler hat. "Go," Samuel urged, slapping the flank of her horse. The mare lurched forward, and Genevieve had no choice but to grip the reins and follow where the animal led. She glanced back once to see Samuel riding in the opposite direction, drawing the attention of their pursuers. 3 riders broke off to follow him. But her father turned his horse toward her. Genevieve dug her heels into the mare's sides, urging her to greater speed. The animal responded magnificently, her powerful muscles bunching as she stretched into a full gallop. Behind her, her father's shouts faded with distance. For hours, she rode along the river, occasionally stopping to rest the horse and scan the horizon for signs of pursuit. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly, and both she and the mare were exhausted. She found a shady spot beneath a cluster of junipers and dismounted, allowing the horse to drink from the river while she splashed water on her face. The men's clothing was hot and restrictive, but she had to admit it was far more practical for riding than her usual attire. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself, staring at her reflection in the slow-moving water. Her face was sunburned, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had never defied her father before. After her mother died when Genevieve was 12, she had become the lady of the house, managing the servants, hosting his business associates for dinner, playing the perfect daughter. Even when he had announced her engagement to Gregory Amberson 3 months ago, she had swallowed her objections, believing Samuel was never coming back. And now she was a fugitive, separated from the man she loved, pursued by the man who had raised her. A twig snapped behind her. Genevieve whirled, reaching instinctively for the knife Samuel had tucked into her belt, but it was too late. Her father stood there, his normally immaculate suit covered in dust, his face a mask of fury and disappointment. "Genevieve," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "This has gone far enough." She backed away, keeping the knife visible. "I'm not coming back, father. That man has poisoned your mind." He took a step toward her. "The Ambersons are still willing to overlook this indiscretion if you return now and beg forgiveness. Beg forgiveness." Indignation flared within her. For what? For refusing to be sold like cattle to save your business. Her father flinched as if she'd struck him. "It wasn't like that. The Ambersons are a good family. Gregory would have provided for you. Gregory doesn't love me, she interrupted. And I don't love him. Love, he spat the word. What has love ever provided? Security, respectability, those are what matter in this world, Genevieve. Not to me. She straightened her shoulders, channeling a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Samuel and I will make our own way. Samuel Nolan is a wanted man now, her father countered. Theft, kidnapping. The marshal has sworn out warrants. You'll both hang if you're caught. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it aside. Then we won't be caught. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the small clearing, the gurgle of the river the only sound. Then, surprisingly, her father's shoulders slumped. I don't want to see you hurt, Genevieve, he said softly. You're all I have left of your mother. The mention of her mother pierced Genevieve's resolve. She wouldn't have wanted this for me, father. She married you for love, didn't she? A flicker of something, pain, remembrance, regret crossed his face. Yes, he admitted. Against her father's wishes, we eloped. Then how can you deny me the same choice? He had no answer for that. Genevieve moved toward the mare, keeping her eyes on her father. I have to find Samuel. The others went after him. Gregory and his brothers won't show mercy, her father warned. They're proud men. All the more reason for me to go. She mounted the horse, looking down at the man who had shaped her entire life until yesterday. I'm sorry, father, I truly am. To her shock, he reached up and placed his hand over hers on the reins. The Amberson brothers were heading west when they split off from me. If you go northeast instead, you might avoid them. Hope fluttered in her chest. You're helping me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Your mother would have my hide if I didn't. He stepped back. Go find your cowboy. But Genevieve, be careful. The territory isn't kind to young lovers with stars in their eyes. With a nod of gratitude, she wheeled the mare around and galloped northeast, away from the river, her heart pounding with renewed determination. She would find Samuel, and together they would forge their own path. The terrain grew rougher as she rode, the lush river valley giving way to rocky foothills dotted with scrubby pinyon pines and sage. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a summer thunderstorm. Genevieve knew she needed to find shelter before it hit. As she crested a small rise, she spotted a thin column of smoke rising from a canyon ahead. A campfire or a chimney. Either way, it meant people, and people meant both potential danger and potential help. She approached cautiously, leading the mare on foot through the trees until she could see the source of the smoke. It was a small cabin tucked against the canyon wall, a corral beside it containing 3 horses. One of them was Samuel's Palomino. Relief flooded through her, only to be replaced by caution. If Samuel was here, why wasn't he outside? Where were the Amberson brothers? She tied the mare to a tree and crept closer, staying low and out of sight. As she neared the cabin, she heard voices from within a woman's, followed by a man's gruff response. Not Samuel's voice. Genevieve flattened herself against the rough logs of the cabin, inching toward the single window. Carefully, she raised her head just enough to peer inside. The cabin was sparsely furnished: a table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, and a narrow bed in the corner. On that bed lay Samuel, his face pale, a blood-stained bandage wrapped around his upper arm. Standing over him was an older woman with silver-streaked black hair, wiping his forehead with a damp cloth. Seated at the table was a man about Samuel's age, cleaning a rifle. Fever's getting worse, the woman said, her voice tinged with worry. The bullet's still in there. I ain't no doctor, Ma, the man replied. Best I could do was stop the bleeding, if we don't get that bullet out soon. She didn't finish the sentence. Genevieve's heart raced. Samuel was wounded, possibly dying, and she was hiding outside like a coward. Before she could think better of it, she straightened and moved to the door, pushing it open with trembling hands. The man at the table leapt to his feet, rifle raised. "Who the hell are you?" "My name is Genevieve Forrester," she said, her eyes never leaving Samuel's still form. "That man is mine." The woman turned, surprise evident on her weather-worn face. "You're Jenny." Samuel's girl, Genevieve nodded, moving toward the bed despite the rifle still pointed at her. "What happened to him?" "Amberson brothers happened," the man said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Caught up to him about 5 miles from here. Shot him when he wouldn't tell them where you were. Is he?" She couldn't finish the question. "He's alive," the woman assured her. "But that bullet needs to come out." She studied Genevieve with shrewd eyes. "You got steady hands, girl." Yes, I suppose." "Good. 'Cause mine aren't what they used to be, and my son here has all the surgical skill of a blacksmith." The man grunted in apparent agreement. "I'm Clara Whitfield," the woman continued, "and that's my son Thomas. Samuel did us a good turn once, so we're returning the favor. But if you're his woman, seems right you should help save him." Genevieve swallowed hard. "I'll do whatever it takes." Clara nodded approvingly. "Thomas, get my sewing kit and the whiskey and heat up that skinning knife in the fire." For the next hour, Genevieve followed Clara's instructions, holding Samuel down when he thrashed in pain, dabbing away blood, and finally, helping to stitch the wound closed after Clara extracted the bullet with a pair of sewing scissors. Through it all, Samuel remained unconscious, his skin burning with fever. "Will he live?" Genevieve asked when they had finished, her hands stained with his blood. Clara sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's up to God now. We've done what we can." Outside, the storm had arrived, rain lashing against the cabin's single window, thunder rolling across the canyon. Thomas had gone to secure the horses, leaving Genevieve alone with Clara and the unconscious Samuel. "How did you find him?" Genevieve asked, gently stroking Samuel's hair back from his forehead. "We didn't. He found us," Clara replied, settling into a rocking chair by the fire. "Came riding up half-conscious, bleeding all over his saddle. Said the Ambersons were after him, that we should be careful." "Where are they now?" Thomas tracked them heading back toward Santa Fe. "Seems they thought they'd killed him and gave up the chase." Relief washed through Genevieve. At least for now they were safe. "Samuel spoke of you," Clara said suddenly, "before the fever took hold. Said you were the bravest woman he'd ever known, running off with him like that." Genevieve looked down at Samuel's face, peaceful now despite the fever. "I'm not brave, just in love." "Same thing sometimes," Clara chuckled. "My Thomas's father swept me off my feet much the same way, though there was no wedding to interrupt. Just an angry father with a shotgun." Despite everything, Genevieve smiled. "What happened? We outran him, built this cabin, raised our boy." Her eyes grew distant. "Lost John to the Apaches 15 years ago, but we had a good life together. No regrets." "That's all I want," Genevieve whispered. "A good life with Samuel. No regrets." "Then fight for it, girl. The territory isn't easy on women, especially not ones who buck convention. But there's freedom out here you won't find back east or in those fancy Santa Fe parlors." Genevieve nodded, determination setting her jaw. "I'll fight for him, for us." Clara patted her hand. "Good girl, now get some rest, it's going to be a long night." And it was. Samuel's fever raged, breaking only to rise again. Genevieve and Clara took turns bathing his face with cool water, spooning broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. Thomas kept watch outside, wary of the Ambersons' return despite his assurances they had gone. Dawn broke with no change in Samuel's condition. Exhausted, Genevieve had fallen asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on the mattress near his hand. She woke to fingers gently stroking her hair. "There she is," came Samuel's hoarse whisper. She lifted her head, hardly daring to believe. His eyes were open, clear of fever, and filled with such tenderness it made her throat tight. "Samuel," she breathed, reaching to touch his face. "You're awake. Seems so." He winced as he tried to shift. "Though I feel like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo. Gregory's brothers shot you," she explained, helping him take a sip of water. "The Whitfields have been caring for you, Clara and Thomas." He nodded weakly. "Good people. But Jenny, how did you find me?" "Your father let me go," she finished for him. "He helped me, actually, told me which way to ride to avoid the Ambersons." Samuel's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned. The old man has a heart after all." He remembered what it was like to be young and in love, I think. She squeezed his hand. "I was so afraid I'd lost you. Takes more than an Amberson bullet to keep me from you." His smile faded. "But they'll be back, Jenny. This isn't over." "I know." She straightened, squaring her shoulders. "But we'll face them together." Samuel's eyes darkened with emotion. "I don't deserve you, Genevieve Forrester." "That's where you're wrong, Samuel Nolan." She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a soft promise of all that was to come. "We deserve each other, and that's why we'll win." Over the next 3 days, Samuel regained his strength with remarkable speed. Clara's herbal poultices kept infection at bay, and Genevieve's constant care ensured he ate and drank enough to rebuild his strength. By the 4th day, he was able to sit on the porch of the cabin, watching as Thomas taught Genevieve how to shoot a rifle. "You're a natural," Thomas called as she hit the tin can he'd placed on a stump 50 yards away. Genevieve lowered the rifle, a small smile of satisfaction playing on her lips. "My father never allowed me to touch firearms, said they weren't ladylike." "Well, out here, being alive is more important than being ladylike," Clara commented, bringing a tray of coffee to the porch. Samuel accepted a cup with his good arm, watching Genevieve with pride. "She's always been tougher than she looks." "I can see that," Clara agreed. "Girl rides off with a cowboy, defies her father, and helps dig a bullet out of said cowboy without fainting. That's frontier stock right there." Genevieve blushed at the praise, setting the rifle aside to join them on the porch. "I've been thinking," she said, taking a seat beside Samuel. "We can't stay here much longer. We're putting the Whitfields in danger." Samuel nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. As soon as I can ride, we should move on." "Where to?" Clara asked. "The Ambersons have connections all over the territory." "My claim in Colorado," Samuel suggested. "It's remote, difficult to find if you don't know what you're looking for." Thomas, who had joined them, shook his head. "Word in town is the Ambersons have hired Pinkerton men. They'll track you to Colorado sure as sunrise." Genevieve's heart sank. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was renowned for their ability to find anyone, anywhere. If Gregory's family had hired them, there was little hope of simply disappearing. "Then we fight," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. "Not with guns, with the law," Samuel frowned. "What do you mean, we get married?" she explained, warming to the idea. "Legally. Then I'm your wife, not Gregory's runaway bride. They can't claim kidnapping if I'm with you willingly as your lawful wife." "That's actually quite clever," Clara said, nodding appreciatively. "But we'd need a preacher willing to marry us, knowing the circumstances," Samuel pointed out, "and a marriage license. Both require going into a town, exposing ourselves." Thomas cleared his throat. "There's a settlement about a day's ride north. Silver Creek. Small place, mostly miners. Got a preacher who isn't too particular about asking questions, so long as his palm is greased properly." Hope flared in Genevieve's chest. "Could you take us there?" Thomas glanced at his mother, who gave him a small nod. "I could. Been meaning to head that way anyhow. Got a friend there owes me money." Samuel turned to Genevieve, his expression serious. Are you sure about this, Jenny? Marrying on the run, living rough until we can clear my name. It's not the life I wanted to give you. She took his face in her hands, uncaring of their audience. It's a life with you. That's all that matters. The journey to Silver Creek took longer than expected. Samuel, still weak from his wound, could only ride for short stretches before needing to rest. Thomas led them along game trails and dry creek beds, avoiding the main roads where the Pinkerton men might be looking. By the time they arrived, a week had passed since they'd fled the Whitfield cabin. Silver Creek was little more than a collection of rough wooden buildings strung along a dirt street, with the mountains looming behind it like silent guardians. Not exactly Santa Fe, Genevieve remarked as they rode slowly into town. Samuel chuckled. No, but it has its charms. Those charms were difficult to discern at first glance. The town's few inhabitants, mostly bearded miners, and the occasional weathered woman eyed them suspiciously as they passed. At the end of the street stood a small church, its white paint peeling, its steeple listing slightly to one side. That's where we'll find Preacher Hayes, Thomas said, pointing. But first, let's get you two cleaned up. Can't get married looking like you've been dragged through the brush. He led them to a small boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Bennett, who agreed to let them use rooms to wash and change. Thomas disappeared to find his friend who owed him money, promising to return with the preacher. Alone in her tiny room, Genevieve stared at her reflection in the spotted mirror above the wash basin. Her skin was tanned from days in the sun, her hands rough from work. The fine lady from Santa Fe was gone, replaced by a woman who could ride all day, shoot a rifle, and tend wounds without flinching. From her saddlebags, she removed the only dress she had, a simple blue calico Clara had given her, altered to fit her smaller frame. It wasn't a wedding gown by any means, but as she slipped it on, smoothing the fabric over her hips, Genevieve thought she had never felt more beautiful. A knock at the door startled her. "Jenny," Samuel's voice. "Are you ready? Thomas is back with the preacher." She opened the door to find Samuel standing there, freshly shaved, his dark hair damp from washing. He'd found a clean shirt somewhere, and though his wounded arm was still bound in a sling, he looked almost like the man who had courted her in secret back in Santa Fe. His eyes widened at the sight of her in the dress. "You look perfect," he breathed. "So do you," she replied, reaching up to smooth his collar. "Ready to make an honest woman of me, Mr. Nolan? I've been ready since the day I met you, Miss Forrester." He offered his good arm. "Shall we?" The ceremony was brief and simple. Preacher Hayes, a man who smelled strongly of cheap whiskey but whose eyes were kind, read the traditional vows in the empty church. Thomas stood as witness, along with Mrs. Bennett, who had been persuaded to attend with the promise of extra payment for her rooms. "Do you, Samuel Nolan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Samuel's eyes never left Genevieve's as he spoke. "I do." "And do you, Genevieve Forrester, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," she replied, her voice clear and unwavering. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher closed his Bible. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel's kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise sealed before God and what few witnesses they had. When they parted, Genevieve saw tears in his eyes to match her own. "Mrs. Nolan," he whispered, testing the name. "Mrs. Nolan," she repeated, liking the sound of it. Thomas cleared his throat from behind them. "Hate to break up the moment, but we should get that marriage certificate signed and be on our way. Word travels fast, even to places like Silver Creek. They followed the preacher to his small office attached to the church, where he filled out the official document, signing it with a flourish. Thomas and Mrs. Bennet added their signatures as witnesses. "Keep this safe," Preacher Hayes advised, handing the certificate to Genevieve. "It's your protection now." As they exited the church, Thomas suddenly stiffened, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Don't look now, but we've got company." At the far end of the street, 3 riders had just arrived. Even at a distance, Genevieve recognized Gregory Amberson's distinctive bowler hat. "How did they find us?" she gasped. "Doesn't matter," Samuel said grimly. "Thomas, get Jenny to the horses." "I'll handle this." "No," Genevieve said firmly, gripping his arm. "We face them together. We're legally married now, they can't separate us." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Together, then." The 3 of them walked purposefully toward the newcomers, who had dismounted and were questioning a local miner. The man pointed in their direction, and Gregory turned, his face contorting with rage when he saw Genevieve. "There she is," he shouted to his companions. "And the thief." The Amberson brothers started toward them, Gregory in the lead, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled from days of travel. "Genevieve," he called, his voice carrying down the quiet street. "Your father is sick with worry. Come home now and all will be forgiven." She felt Samuel tense beside her but placed a calming hand on his arm. "I am home," she called back, "with my husband." Gregory faltered mid-step. "Husband, what nonsense is this?" Samuel stepped forward, pulling the marriage certificate from his pocket. "Legal and binding, Amberson. Genevieve is my wife now. Whatever claim you think you had on her is void." The oldest Amberson brother, William, laid a restraining hand on Gregory's shoulder. "Is this true?" he demanded. "You're married to him." "It is," Genevieve confirmed. "By Preacher Hayes with witnesses." "You can verify it yourselves." Gregory shook off his brother's hand, his face flushed with anger. "I don't care about some backwater ceremony. She was promised to me." "By her father, not by her," Samuel countered. "And a woman has the right to choose her own husband in this country." William Amberson studied them thoughtfully. Unlike his volatile younger brother, he was a businessman first and foremost. "The horse," he said finally. "You still stole our property." Samuel nodded. "Fair point. The mare is yours to take back, and compensation for our trouble. The Pinkerton men we hired don't come cheap." Thomas stepped forward. "I've got $50, says you take the horse and leave these 2 alone." William raised an eyebrow. $50 for a $200 horse, a broken engagement, and a week's chase across the territory. "That's poor bargaining, friend." "Add this," Genevieve said, pulling Gregory's gold ring from her pocket. "It should more than cover your expenses." William took the ring, examining it in the sunlight. "Gregory gave you this," she nodded. "I never wanted it." A small smile tugged at William's lips. "Interesting." He pocketed the ring and turned to his seething brother. "Let it go, Gregory. The girl's made her choice." "You can't be serious," Gregory sputtered. "After all we've invested, in a business deal with her father, not in her," William interrupted sharply. "There are other ways to secure the Forrester property and other suitable young ladies in Santa Fe." He turned back to Samuel and Genevieve. "We'll take the mare and consider the matter closed, but don't return to Santa Fe. My brother's pride won't heal as quickly as your arm has, Nolan." Relief washed over Genevieve. "Thank you, Mr. Amberson." He tipped his hat. "Mrs. Nolan." As the Amberson brothers mounted their horses, Gregory, still fuming, but outvoted by his older brothers, Genevieve leaned against Samuel, suddenly exhausted. "Is it really over?" she whispered. Samuel wrapped his good arm around her. "With the Ambersons, yes. But we've still got a life to build, Mrs. Nolan." Thomas clapped Samuel on the shoulder. "And somewhere to build it. Come on, I know a place you can stay tonight that's more private than Mrs. Bennet's boarding house." That night, in a small cabin on the outskirts of Silver Creek that belonged to Thomas's friend, Samuel and Genevieve Nolan consummated their marriage. Their lovemaking was tender, mindful of Samuel's healing wound, but no less passionate for it. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath rough wool blankets, Genevieve traced patterns on her husband's chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That I never imagined my wedding night would be in a miner's cabin with a dirt floor," she replied with a small laugh. Samuel chuckled. Disappointed? Not in the least. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "We're together, that's all that matters." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Still, you deserve better than this, Jenny. A proper home, nice things." She silenced him with a kiss. "I have everything I need right here. But if it makes you feel better, you can build me a palace once we reach your claim in Colorado." "It's hardly a palace," he warned. "Just a simple cabin with a good view. Then we'll make it grander together." She settled back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me about it." As Samuel described the small mining claim he'd staked in the mountains of Colorado, the stream full of trout, the meadow where they could graze cattle, the forest that provided ample game, Genevieve closed her eyes, imagining their future together. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs. They left Silver Creek the next morning, Thomas accompanying them as far as the territorial border before turning back to rejoin his mother. The journey to Colorado took nearly 2 weeks, slowed by Samuel's need to rest his healing arm and the caution required to avoid main trails where Pinkerton men might still be looking for them. By the time they reached Samuel's claim in the mountains west of Denver, autumn was painting the aspen trees gold and crimson. The cabin was just as Samuel had described, small but sturdy, with a stone chimney and a porch facing the mountain vista. A creek bubbled nearby and a small corral stood empty, waiting for horses. "Welcome home, Mrs. Nolan," Samuel said as he helped her down from her horse. Genevieve turned in a slow circle, taking in the wild beauty of the place. "It's perfect," she breathed. That first winter tested them both. The cabin needed repairs before the snow came, and with Samuel's arm still not at full strength, much of the work fell to Genevieve. She learned to chop wood, to hunt small game, to preserve food for the months when the mountain passes would be impassable. Her soft hands grew calloused, her skin weathered, but her spirit remained unbroken. When the first blizzard hit in December, they were ready. The cabin was sealed against the wind, the woodpile stacked high, the pantry filled with dried meat, preserved fruits, and sacks of beans and flour. As the snow piled high outside their windows, they spent long evenings by the fire, planning the spring planting, dreaming of the cattle they would buy when the passes cleared. "I got a letter off to your father before the snow came," Samuel confessed one night as they sat wrapped in a quilt before the hearth. "Told him where we were, that we were legally married, that you were safe and happy." Genevieve looked up from the shirt she was mending. "What made you do that?" Samuel shrugged. "He let you go in the end, helped you find me. Seemed right he should know you're all right." She leaned over to kiss him. "Thank you, I've been worried about him, alone in that big house." "Maybe he'll come visit in the spring," Samuel suggested. "See for himself what kind of life his daughter has chosen." The idea warmed Genevieve through the coldest nights of January, when the wind howled like a wounded beast, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the bucket by the hearth. The thought of reconciliation with her father, of building a bridge between her old life and new, gave her hope. Spring came late to the mountains. May brought the first true thaw, the creek swelling with snowmelt, wildflowers pushing through the muddy earth around the cabin. Samuel's arm had healed completely, and he set to work expanding their small homestead, adding a proper bedroom to the cabin, clearing land for a garden, constructing a more substantial barn for the livestock they planned to acquire. Genevieve, meanwhile, had a secret of her own. By June, there was no hiding the gentle swell of her belly beneath her dresses. Samuel's joy when she told him nearly brought her to tears. "A baby," he whispered, his hand trembling as he placed it on her stomach. "Our baby." "Due in November, I think," she said, covering his hand with her own. "Just in time for our first anniversary." His eyes grew damp. "Jenny, I never thought. When I rode into that church in Santa Fe, I never imagined we'd be here a year later with a home and a child on the way." "Neither did I," she admitted, "but I wouldn't change a moment of it." In July, they received an unexpected visitor. Genevieve was tending the garden when she heard the sound of an approaching horse. Looking up, she shaded her eyes against the sun, her heart racing with momentary fear. But as the rider drew closer, she recognized the tall, dignified figure of her father. "Papa," she breathed, dropping her gardening tools and running to meet him. George Forrester dismounted stiffly, his once dark hair now streaked with more gray than Genevieve remembered. For a moment, they stood facing each other, years of hurt and misunderstanding stretching between them like a chasm. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sob, he opened his arms. Genevieve flew into them, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling like a little girl again as his strong arms encircled her. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered against his shoulder. "Neither did I," he admitted, drawing back to look at her. His eyes widened as they took in her condition. "Genevieve, you're expecting?" She nodded, one hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. "Your grandchild, due in November." Something shifted in her father's expression, a softening, a surrender. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said quietly. "She always said you had her spirit, her determination." "I've missed you, Papa. And I've missed you, my girl." He glanced around at the small homestead. "So this is the life you chose over Santa Fe society." Before she could defend her choice, Samuel appeared from the barn, stopping short when he saw their visitor. He approached cautiously, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Mr. Forrester," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to our home." To Genevieve's surprise, her father clasped Samuel's hand firmly. "Nolan, your letter was unexpected, but appreciated, I hope." Samuel moved to stand beside Genevieve, his arm slipping naturally around her waist. Her father's eyes followed the gesture, noting the easy intimacy between them. "Yes," he said finally. "It was." He cleared his throat. "I've brought some things from home. Items your mother would have wanted you to have, Genevieve, and some supplies I thought might be useful." "You're staying for supper, at least?" Genevieve asked, hope making her voice bright. "We have plenty." A small smile touched his lips. "I'd like that." That evening, the three of them sat at the rough-hewn table Samuel had built, sharing a meal of trout, fresh baked bread, and early vegetables from Genevieve's garden. The conversation was stilted at first, but as the meal progressed, it flowed more naturally. George Forrester spoke of changes in Santa Fe, of business dealings with the railroad, of old friends who sent their regards. "And the Ambersons?" Genevieve asked hesitantly. "Have they recovered from the scandal?" her father chuckled. "Gregory married the Henderson girl 3 months ago. A much better match, temperamentally. And William Amberson and I have a new arrangement regarding my cattle, strictly business this time, no daughters involved." Samuel laughed at that, and after a moment, George joined in. It was a watershed moment, the three of them laughing together in the cabin that had seemed so far from Santa Fe's society, but had become the center of Genevieve's world. When it came time for bed, Genevieve insisted her father take their bedroom while she and Samuel slept on pallets before the fire. "We've done it before," she assured him when he protested. "During the worst of the winter, when the bedroom was too cold." As they lay side by side in the firelight, Samuel whispered, "He's different than I expected. Softer." "Grief hardened him after my mother died," Genevieve replied, stroking Samuel's cheek. "But this is more like the father I remember from childhood. He loves you, Jenny. That much is clear." "And you, what do you think of him now?" Samuel considered this. "I think he's a man who realizes what truly matters. Family. Love. The things money can't buy." Genevieve smiled in the darkness. "My two favorite men finding common ground at last." George Forrester stayed for a week, helping Samuel with the barn construction, teaching Genevieve her mother's recipes, sitting on the porch in the evenings to smoke his pipe and watch the sunset paint the mountains gold. By the time he prepared to leave, something fundamental had shifted between them. "I'll be back before the baby comes," he promised as he mounted his horse. "And I'll bring a proper cradle. Every child should have a proper place to sleep." "You're welcome anytime, Papa," Genevieve said, fighting tears. "This is your home too now." He reached down to cup her cheek. "My home is where my family is, Genevieve. I see that now." He turned to Samuel. "Take care of my girl, Nolan." Samuel nodded solemnly. "With my life, sir." As her father rode away, Genevieve leaned against her husband, his arm strong around her shoulders. "I never thought I'd have this," she admitted. "You, our baby, my father's blessing. It seems too perfect." "Not perfect," Samuel corrected, kissing the top of her head. "Just right." The months passed in a rhythm of work and preparation. Samuel traded with passing hunters and the occasional prospector, acquiring the supplies they would need for the baby and the coming winter. Genevieve sewed tiny garments, preserved the bounty from her garden, and wrote long letters to her father that Samuel would take to the nearest settlement when he went to trade. In early November, the first snow dusted the mountain peaks. Genevieve, now heavy with child, found herself restless, organizing and reorganizing the small cabin in preparation for the birth. Samuel watched her with a mixture of amusement and concern. "The baby won't care if the plates are stacked just so," he teased as she rearranged the shelves for the third time that day. "I know," she sighed, one hand pressed to her lower back. "I just want everything to be perfect when—" She broke off suddenly, her eyes widening. "Samuel." He was at her side in an instant. "What is it?" I think it's time." For all their preparation, the reality of labor was more intense than either had anticipated. Without a midwife or doctor, Samuel was forced to rely on the instructions in a medical text he'd purchased months earlier, and the practical knowledge Genevieve had gained from helping birth calves on her father's ranch. Through the long night, as snow began to fall in earnest outside, Genevieve labored with a strength that left Samuel in awe. Dawn was breaking when their son finally slipped into the world, his lusty cries filling the cabin. "He's perfect," Samuel whispered, laying the swaddled infant in Genevieve's arms. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs like a mountain lion." Genevieve laughed through her tears, gazing down at their child's scrunched red face. "Hello, little one, we've been waiting for you. What shall we call him?" Samuel asked, perching on the edge of the bed, one finger gently stroking his son's cheek. "Thomas," Genevieve said without hesitation. "After the man who helped save your life and stood witness at our wedding." Samuel nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Thomas George Nolan, a good, strong name." 3 days later, as the new family was settling into their changed routine, a knock came at the door. Samuel opened it to find George Forrester standing there, snow coating his hat and shoulders, a large wooden cradle strapped to his pack mule. "Am I too late?" he asked anxiously. Samuel grinned. "Just in time, sir. Come meet your grandson." The scene that followed would stay with Genevieve forever. Her father, the once stern businessman, cradling his tiny grandson with hands that trembled slightly, whispering promises and blessings as tears tracked unashamedly down his weathered cheeks. "He has your mother's eyes," he told Genevieve, "and your determination. I can see it already." That Christmas was unlike any Genevieve had known. The cabin was warm and bright, decorated with pine boughs and red berries she and Samuel had gathered. Baby Thomas slept in his grandfather-made cradle, occasionally waking to demand attention with surprising force for one so small. The three adults exchanged simple gifts: hand-knitted scarves from Genevieve, a carved pipe for George, new boots for Samuel that George had brought from Santa Fe. But the greatest gift, Genevieve reflected as she watched her husband and father play a game of chess by the fire, was this unlikely family they had created. From the scandal of her interrupted wedding had come a love stronger than she had ever imagined possible, a home built with their own hands, and a future full of promise. As if sensing her thoughts, Samuel looked up and caught her eye, his smile so full of love it made her heart ache. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Nolan," she smiled back, adjusting the sleeping Thomas in her arms. "Just thinking how glad I am that you interrupted my wedding." "Best thing I ever did," he agreed. George Forrester cleared his throat. "Much as it pains me to admit it, I agree. You two belong together." He moved a chess piece decisively. "Check." Samuel turned back to the game with a groan, and Genevieve laughed, the sound mingling with the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of her son. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their mountain home in pristine white, but inside was all warmth and love and the promise of tomorrow. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The small cabin grew into a proper ranch house, as Samuel's hard work and George Forrester's occasional financial assistance allowed them to expand their holdings. A small herd of cattle grazed in the meadow below the house, and a vegetable garden twice the size of the original supplied their table with fresh produce through the summer and preserved bounty through the winter. Thomas, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, had been joined by a sister, Clara Rose, named for the woman who had saved Samuel's life and the grandmother she would never know. At 3, Clara was already showing signs of the same determination that had carried Genevieve through that fateful year. Life in the mountains was not always easy. Winters were harsh, isolating them for weeks at a time. Summers brought the threat of forest fires and the occasional unwelcome visitor: hungry bears, territorial mountain lions, or desperate men seeking to take what wasn't theirs. But through it all, Samuel and Genevieve faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing year. George Forrester visited regularly, spending summers at the ranch and returning to Santa Fe for the winter months. His business continued to thrive, but his priorities had shifted. Family came first now, a lesson he often said he had learned too late but was grateful to have learned at all. On the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel woke Genevieve before dawn. "Get dressed," he whispered, mindful of the children sleeping in the next room. "I have a surprise for you." Curious, she followed him outside where 2 horses stood saddled and ready. The November air was crisp but not yet bitter, the stars still bright overhead. "Where are we going?" she asked as he helped her mount. "What about the children? Your father's watching them. They won't even wake before we're back." He swung into his own saddle. "Trust me." "Always," she replied without hesitation. He led her up a trail they rarely used, climbing higher into the mountains as the eastern sky began to lighten. Just as the sun crested the horizon, They reached a small plateau overlooking their ranch, the house with smoke curling from its chimney, the barn and corral, the cattle moving like dark specks in the meadow below. Samuel dismounted and helped Genevieve down, then spread a blanket on a flat rock. From his saddlebag, he produced a small basket containing bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine. "Breakfast with a view," he explained, pouring 2 cups, "and a chance to reflect." Genevieve settled beside him, accepting the wine with a smile. "Reflect on what? On how far we've come." He gazed out at their home below. 5 years ago, you were standing at an altar in Santa Fe, about to marry a man you didn't love. Until a certain cowboy interrupted proceedings, she finished, leaning against his shoulder. "They laughed at you," he said softly. "I remember hearing it as I walked in. They laughed as you stood at the altar, so unsure, so trapped. And then you walked in and took my hand instead," she murmured. "The bravest, most foolish thing anyone has ever done for me." Samuel chuckled. "Foolish, definitely. I had no plan beyond getting you out of that church. And yet here we are." She gestured to the vista before them, not just the ranch, but the life they had built together. "I wouldn't change a moment of it, Samuel, not one single moment." He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Neither would I, Jenny. You and the children, this place, it's more than I ever dreamed of having. Even when the roof leaks and the cattle break through the fence and Thomas decides to help by letting all the chickens loose," she teased. "Even then." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I have something for you. It's not fancy like what Gregory Amberson might have given you, but it's from you," she interrupted gently. "That makes it perfect." Inside the box lay a simple gold band set with a small emerald that caught the morning light. "To replace your wedding ring," Samuel explained. "The plain one was all I could afford then, but I always promised myself I'd get you a proper one someday." Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes as she slipped it onto her finger, where it nestled perfectly against her original wedding band. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "Thank you," he countered, "for taking my hand that day, for believing in me, for building this life with me." As the sun rose higher, bathing the mountains in golden light, Genevieve leaned in to kiss her husband, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for the path they had chosen together. From scandal to sanctuary, from flight to home, their love story, written across the wild landscape of the West, was still only beginning. In the small church in Silver Creek, where they renewed their vows that afternoon before their children, her father, and the few friends they had made in the mountains, Genevieve caught Samuel's eye as they spoke the familiar words. "I do," she promised again, her voice clear and strong. No laughter interrupted this ceremony, only the happy babbling of their daughter and the proud grin of their son. This time, when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was witnessed not by strangers, but by the family they had created together, the truest legacy of that long-ago day when a determined cowboy walked into a church in Santa Fe and changed both their lives forever.